Welcome to the final section, the polishing section. In this one, we're going to go over our game, make sure we have some proper content, some proper gameplay chunks, some good lighting, some good scene. We're just going to go over the game and make sure everything looks good because our logic is pretty much done. So we've managed to get pretty much everything we wanted in the game. Of course, there's always spaces for improvement or new mechanics here and there. But in terms of having a full loop and the full content of this game, then it's out there. Now, it's a matter of making it look good. It's a matter of designing gameplay that is enticing and also not too repetitive. And yeah, and I'd like to begin by actually changing the lighting. One of the big things that I've been having in mind this whole time is just getting this to look a lot better. And this looks a little bit depressing when I open my project on a daily basis. So the first thing I'll do here is I'll grab the skybox again and I'll drag and drop that back into the world. We removed it at one point. We wanted to play around with the UI, and this didn't really help us, so we remove it, but now it's back. So you just click and drag and drop that over the sky. The next thing I'd like to do is play around with the lighting a little bit. So under Window, Rendering, Lighting Settings, I'm going to go here and switch from a skybox source lighting, which is what we have right now, to a gradient that I'll manually define. So over here, environment lighting, I'm going to go and choose gradient, and I'll be zooming in on our scene just to have a better look at this. So as soon as I switch to lighting, maybe I can play around with the sky color. I want the sky to give me a very dark highlight. And the flow could be total white, so like this, and maybe in between for the equator, which is the one that makes the biggest difference right now. And I think this looks quite good. So I'll be going with this option right here of deselections. So for the rendering lighting, there you go. So a black, a very light gray, and then a white for the ground. Now, the next thing that bothers me quite a lot, and I've been asking this question when I toggle this feature on, is actually the shadows. So if I go under Edit, Project Settings, and I'd like to go under Quality. Now, under Quality, I wanted to make sure the real-time reflection probe are set because I'd like to put one in there. And we're just going to leave it on top of our player all the time. So I'd like to just put that in there, get a little bit of reflection, and it's not going to be something that will be constantly refresh. So it's something that we'll take a picture of at the beginning, so on the wake, and then we will just leave it running. So that's it for quality. Then I'm going to head over to graphics, and under graphics, let's have a look here. I'd like to choose my scriptable rendering pipeline. So everything here seems to be okay. I'm going to go back on my scriptable rendering pipeline settings. You'll see them on the right-hand side. And let's have a look. So we don't want the high definition range. We don't need that because our color are quite simple here. Rendering scale is on 1. That's good. Under lighting, we now have the shadows, but I'm not sure anymore if I'd like to keep the shadow. Of course, they look good here at the beginning. You can put some crazy resolution too, but it's something we might as well want to bake just for this starting scene. But you know what? I'm actually going to disable all the shadows. And we are going to avoid this cost by just putting that down on 0. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to be running shadows. Okay, let's give it a look in the game. See how it looks like without shadows. See if we can get through. And it seems like we can get through. I like that a little bit better without shadows because I don't see it really seemed like artifacts to me. So those blob of shadow that were flickering a little bit. I could have increased the shadow and make them smoother, but that comes at a very high performance cost. So I'm not sure I'm ready to do something like that for a mobile game. Now, we mentioned a reflection probe a couple of seconds ago, and I'd like to create one right here. So I'll head over Lights, Reflection Probe, and I'll drag and drop that on top of my penguin so it just follows him around. Now I'll stack this directly on top of him, and let's go ahead and just click on the bounds and make sure it includes pretty much the whole scene and even beyond than that. So you know what? I'll just set it manually here. And as we've mentioned, we'd like to have this bake only once at the beginning. And the way we can do that is by putting it on real time, but only trigger it on awake, which means at the very beginning, we'll get to have the reflection probe applied, and then that's it. only at that time. I might want to lower down the intensity just a tiny bit. And it seems like my snow is really extremely white in this case, and maybe I want to change that. So I'm gonna go play around with the texture. All right, so I went ahead and I changed the texture. For you, this should be automatically this color initially. So the whole tutorial, you saw a very, very white snow texture. Well, that wasn't like that on your end, and that's because I've just changed it now, and you received a new package. And I seem to like this color quite a lot better than what we had for sure. And I think we're good on this one. So we messed around with the lighting settings, and I enjoyed this a lot better than I used to. So there's that. I think it's a good change. In the next one, we will tackle the whole environment around here, the starting point, and also the shop. And yeah, so that's what we'll do next. I think that's going to be another big touch to our game. See you then. Last time, we messed around with the light just to make sure we could see something, and also we removed the shadows, which gave us a much brighter alternative. So what we'd like to do today is to play around with the scene. So I'd like the scene to change its layout a little bit. Maybe I want to change the angle in which I look at the penguin and also just put stuff around. So the big goal of this episode is going to be to make sure that when I look around, I don't see any glitch in the background and also that the scene is disposed properly. So here, if I click on shop, you'll see we see this big line here at the back and I don't like that. So we're going to make sure to clear the horizon, and the other part we'll need to fix is here. When we press on play, we could see the horizon over there as well. So the area we're trying to cover is everything that the camera covers. So in this case, this part and also this part would like to just put more stuff in there. Now, one thing that we could do, could start off with, is just change the angle at which I'm looking at my penguin just a tiny bit. I like to see him from maybe roughly this angle. Seems a little bit more. And we have to make sure it makes sense with the menu as well. So I just booted up the game and I'm looking. It does make sense with the menu. We're not taking too much spot. Maybe we want to get a little bit closer even. Yeah, something like that. And do note that the hat is going to be less annoying in the future because it's going to be a real hat. But I could go with something like that. Now we can replace the background without any problem. The only thing we can't move is the player. That's why I'm kind of focusing around him. And here we go. So I'll use this. And to make sure I save, I'll right click on the transform while it's at runtime, copy the component, and then paste component value so it goes back there. Now we got a brand new angle. And it's time to start playing around with the background. So here, I'm moving stuff in the scene view, but I'm really just looking at what I have in the game view because that's the scene we're trying to set up. That's where the magic happens. And yeah, so this cabin here, we could put it like that. Fireplace could be a tad closer and smaller. And do remember, we have a bunch of assets we can use as well. So I will go back under my model folder, under, I believe it was environment. We have some firewood we could use. Yep, so I'm going to use that firewood and just put it right there. A gift? I'm going to put a gift in there. Why not? We barely see this gift, but the small details are what really matters at the end of the day. So maybe even we see it through here. That could be cool. Also, do know that we might see inside of that house as well when we flip the camera over to the shop. Oh, and what's going to be very important is that over here in the back. So I'm going to make sure to cover a little bit of it, maybe add a tree. Just like so. Now, if I am to press play on this, I just want to see how the player behaves, how he moves around. That seems fine to me. And when we enter the shop, we'll need a brand new angle. We'll need some stuff in the background. But right now, I believe this is fine. It's a little bit too packed, but do know that we're gonna have a big splash screen here at the top in a few as well. Now it's going to be time for us to decorate this other side, and I'm going to make sure to disable my initialize camera and instead just toggle on the shop one. So we have a better understanding of what's going on. Now, of course, we need to have a look at the hats. So the player will need to be in sight, and will need to be in sight in such a way that it doesn't cover up our menu on the left-hand side. So maybe something like this will do the trick. We can also do as we did earlier because we know the player is moving around, so chances are we should be opening this shop and just doing it live here. Also, do note that the hats, they won't be that big. Yeah, I could go with something like that. So I'll copy this component, paste it, and it's going to be time to actually just move stuff around. So maybe that igloo, we want to have it in the back over there. Okay, so we've managed to set up the camera for the shop and also the camera for the initialize. Now we only need the transition in between these two. So from this to over there. So this whole side here. And I'm thinking maybe just a bit of a glacier over here, something huge. I just don't want to see like the horizon. That's really what I'm trying to avoid. And I feel like we could use this twice, just in a different angle. All right, so I think I've did it. So I've covered that angle as well. Plus, you don't really see it that much, so it's not a big deal. Now, what is a big deal is the fact that we've made a mess out of our key over here. So I'm just gonna make sure I drag every single object that um, isn't well, that is part of the environment. I'll just take that and I'll drag that under our level object, which is roughly here. Yep. We also wanted to get this gift and what else? Those glacier. Just to make sure we can go back to having something a little bit clean. Now, there is a fish collectible that has been sitting there for a couple of videos, and I think it's time for us to remove it finally. My bad on that. But yeah, now we have a better scene in the beginning. Now, do note it looks not so good from the scene view, but what really matter is your game view. As long as you fake it, as long as it looks like it is a big environment to the person who plays, then it is a big environment to the person who plays. That's all you have to do. Okay, that being said, I think we covered pretty much this episode. We've covered what we had to do, which was just to fill in these blank and have a little bit of different camera angles. And yeah, we pretty much succeed. So I'll see you in the next one. I think in the next one we can lay down the splash screen, or we can start looking at doing something else, maybe like the font. That could be nice. Anyway, I'll see you there. Cheers. Welcome back, guys. As a third addition to the polishing round, I thought we could do some sort of splash screen. Now, a couple of ways you could go ahead and do that. You could include a PNG that you've made in this UI if you wish. But what I'm feeling like doing is I'll toggle on this UI just to see this. Is just place some 3D font floating in the air around here. We have a bunch of letters in our model folder, model letters, and we can just place these and have a text show up. So that's what I plan on doing. And I think I'll be doing it inside of a empty game object. So let me just bring that up here just to make sure I can see where it is. Maybe give it a small icon because I don't want anything on top of this object, but I'd like to place it in the air for the moment. Or maybe even like 5,000 in the air, just for editing purpose. Okay, so with that in mind, I am going to drag a couple of letters in here. So the S, the U, and I'm just going to spell it out completely. So spell out the name of the game. And there you go. So I've got all the letters I need. They spell out Subway Skater. And if I am to just move this around, I'm going to select all of them and just move them like so. So, of course, I'm going to have to retouch the position of that, but I'm just going to keep on going until I get the whole word. And as I start a new word, I'm just going to take this and go down. And there we go. So we have our text right here. Now it's a matter of positioning it in such a way that it doesn't look too bad. And for some reason, I'm having a little bit of glitches as I'm trying to edit it up here. So I'll just bring it back down to 0 down here. And I'll call this the splash screen object. Maybe want to position that in such a way that we see it from this angle. Maybe it's a little bit too close, so we want to put it at the back there. And of course, we'll need to have a different color for that. So let's click on one of these fonts. You'll see that the material is called LPN and L1. So if you have a look, usually when you have an object like that and it has a material that is with the object, you can find a material folder within the project. So what I think I'm going to be doing is I'll actually just take this one and I'll drag it out. I don't want to lose a reference to it, and I'll just drag it out right here. We had one called letters over here using another shader. We're going to remove the old one that we had and instead use a brand new one. That is going to be a shader graph main, so the same as we had before, and also we have a texture for letter gradient, which is roughly around here. Now, it doesn't look too great right now, but we could position a light on it so it looks a lot better. But before I go ahead and I do any of those, I'm just gonna make sure that this doesn't look too bad by just going around and maybe just giving it slight more organic style and maybe bigger letters sometime. All right, so here it is. So I placed those around a little bit funky in a funkier manner. Now we do have one issue where it doesn't really look good in that angle, and I believe that is because of the way lights are being set up in our game. So if we have a look this way, it looks great. But once we look at it this way, it just feels like the light doesn't exist on this object whatsoever. So we could be playing around with the light, but as we've done that earlier, I don't really want to play around with the light so much for the sole purpose that we've already cleared that out before. So one of the options we have over here, something we could do is we could go under our settings and create a light that will only affect this. Because right now, if we have a look, for example, we have this light here, the directional light that we use for a game. It would look good if we had directional light that pointed this way, but that did not mess around with anything else but the text. So right now we have a certain setting in our project that makes it so we cannot have two lights. In fact, if I was to take this directional light, copy it, and just move it around, you see there is no impact whatsoever, and that's because there's only one light affecting our project. Now, we can actually resort to that by going over to project settings. Actually, well, you can go on your pipeline asset and then enabling additional light, which we could do per pixel. And now this way, when we do copy something, you see that there's multiple things affecting it now. Which is not what we want either. We only want a light that is going to affect the splash screen. And we can do so by resorting to layers. So on my splash screen object, the one that contains all my letters, I will head over to the layer folder, add a new one, and just call it splash screen. Now I'll make sure to apply that. And yes, change all the children so everyone beneath that has the splash screen layer. I can create my second directional light, which is here. I can just call it, say, splash screen light. And down here under the cooling mask, you can set that to nothing at first and then just the splash screen. And this way, we can now have a light that only affects this. And in a similar fashion, you can go on the other light and toggle off splash screen. So now it's only being affected by one light and not two, if that's how you want to vibe. And there you go. So like that, we now have a splash screen. And I just realized that we also changed the hat colors. That's good. At one point, we'll have real hats, but right now we don't. Do note that the real hats won't be as long as this. Oh, well, maybe we can have a top hat that's as long as this, but at the moment, we don't have that. So just have that in note. And that's it. In the next one, I believe we could tackle the font, and then we could move on to making some gameplay stuff. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, I'll see you there. Welcome back to another polishing session for this game, and today we're going to be looking at fonts. But before we go through that, I'd just like to say that you might see something different with the project, and it's just the fact that I've changed the background buttons here. I might change them again in the future because they do not stack very well with the play button, but that's something I might do later on. And if you start this course and you have different files, then it's completely normal. Okay, Now, when it comes down to font, you gotta be kind of careful what you do because you can't just take any font on the internet and hope that it's gonna work for your project. You have to take something or make something that doesn't have any royalty associated with it, that has the proper license. One of the places that I like to go to find these fonts is the safest place, I believe, and it's the fonts.google.com. And I've never had any issues with the license thus far. One I've been going for is one called Grandstander. I believe it has a comic and also not childish, but a little bit of a comic feel to it that I think is going to fit our game well. So that's the font I've decided to go for this game. And if we click on license, we have a look. We are free to use this in our product and project, print, digital, commercial, or otherwise. However, I cannot sell the font on their own, which I'm not doing. I'm including them as part of another package. So by reading this, I'm quite assured that I can use this font. And to do that, you'll have to download the font. So go at the top here, download the font. You'll then receive it as a zip format, and I'm gonna go ahead and extract that zip format. Delete the other file, just clean up everything, and I will take a, for example, a static regular font. So I'll take this one, cut it, and find my project folder, drop it under the artwork folder. Yeah, under the artwork folder, I'll create a new folder called font, and I'll just paste it in here. And I'll go clean up what I've made. Okay. Well, actually, you might want to keep it in case that's not the right font, but I just have a very destructive nature when it comes to this. So having a look here in my artwork folder under font, you can now find the font. But it's not as easy as that. Since we're using Text Mesh Pro, it's a little bit different, where we have to create a font asset. So you can't just go here and then change the font because by default, you only have these two when you import Text Mesh Pro without any samples. So here's how we do it. We go under Window, Text Mesh Pro, Font Asset Creator, and then we're going to have to drag and drop our font in here. This will create a font asset. So if we have a look here, this creates this type of texture, and then the fonts are being sampled from that texture. But before we go any further, let's play around with the settings. A padding of 8 is good. Atlas resolution is, I go 2K by 2K, else the definition of those are not very good. And we can give it a try. So I can do, for example, 512, 512, generate this. And you'll see here that you get a lot more blurry images. Either way, we can come back and play around with this, but at the moment, let's just try and save it. Save it inside of same folder. I'll keep the default name. And by doing that, I should now be able to change, if I go under my play button, for example, should now be able to change this for the Grandstander. And then you'll find my font. And yeah, I intend to make this a little bit bigger. And also, should we do anything with this? It feels like this is great. Like we don't need to modify or make the texture a little bit bigger. But do note that when I was generating with only capital letters. And for some reason, we're getting non-capital letters, which is odd to me. And just like this, feels pretty good. We are going to play around with a little bit more. For example, here the outline. I wish I could have a small outline like so. Maybe 0.1 will do the job. Just so we can highlight the text and see it. Maybe even 0.2. That might be too much. Whatever is your liking in this case. And what else could we play around with? By the way, we're under Text Mesh Pro distance field, but I believe we could go under mobile instead. Now, when it comes down to these one thing I'd like to do is to change the material we have on top of that. So right now we have our regular material. That's fine, but I'd like to go ahead and actually change the Text Mesh Pro distance field for one that is mobile friendly. So if we go under Text Mesh Pro, mobile, then distance field, then we can go down here and play around with the settings. For example, we'd like to have a small outline, maybe 0.15. But at least now we're using the mobile friendly, and it should be a little bit less expensive when it goes to rendering fonts. But you'll find out that that's the only one we have. So we have to make sure we swap all of these to the proper the proper font asset. So you won't have to change material once again. You just simply have to change the font asset. For example, this high score, I'll do it once more. We don't go here. Instead, we go under the Text Mesh Pro UI and choose the proper font asset. That being said, I'm just going to go back and rework a little bit of these. For example, I'd like to have bigger text for these. There's an alignment issue that we see here. Maybe I want to have my font lowered a little bit. And the way I could do this, I'd like to do it on the font level. We can play around with this. If we go over to the font asset, which is right here, you'll find a lot of settings. But under the face info, we could play around with the accent line. I believe will do the job. Yep, and it helps us center it a little bit. So you see both of my text here? I can just lower them down to where they should be. Okay, now what I'll be doing is I'll go around my whole application and I'll make sure to modify all the font asset to reflect this, to use my new font. Also, don't forget to head inside of your hat item and actually change the font in here as well, because it's part of the prefab, and we must not forget these. There's two texts here, the hat name and also the hat price. And as mentioned earlier, with these changes of font, you might want to move things around just a tiny bit, and feel free to do those manual at this point, and just make sure it looks good. So I feel like these had to be moved regarding the new background and also the new font. So I decided to do so. And if we are to play this, you're going to realize that most of the text that I've input in the game had no capitals. So here, well, it had one capital, which, the proper way of writing. But one thing I realized is maybe I'd rather have all caps all the time. So I can either select the settings here on the right-hand side, or I could go change my text, or do both. So what I'll be doing is that. So I'll make sure that every text that I've input in that game is actually always using caps. I like caps. One other thing that bothers me is when we change line like so. And sometimes it's not a possibility to make this bigger, because if I am to make this bigger, then I don't start where I want to start my line. And I don't really have an offset here because I'm using something that scales it automatically, so the vertical layout group. So what I tend to do here is disable the wrapping. I don't want it to wrap. And instead, if I go a score that is 5 digits, I'll just let it overflow, and I'm okay with that. That's one of the things you have control over as well. So wrapping of these lines, maybe sometimes you don't want to see any wrapping. Okay, I believe we're pretty much done. Maybe I want to play around with the thickness a little bit, because I have a hard time seeing all the text all the time. But it's something that you're going to be messing around in your game until you find the right feel. Now, just do please go back and forth and make sure all the fonts that you have are looking great for you, to your liking. And also do note that if, for example, here I have too much outline, but I don't have enough at other places, you are allowed to just create another material and run that material instead. So yeah, I'm good pretty much everywhere except here. I'd like to make this fish bigger. Okay, so this completes it for this episode. I'm quite happy with the result. In the next one, we're going to be looking at importing a couple of hats, maybe from an outside source, a third party, and making those thumbnails. Yep, so I'll see you there. In this episode, we're going to be looking at introducing new hats to our players. So at the moment, we have a couple of hats that we've put in there just for debug purpose. As you can see, none, test hat, and number 2. Now, those were using 3D assets that we already had in the project, and actually just using the fonts. But we're going to be looking at importing something else from another source. Now, depending at which time you're looking at this course, you're watching this course, there will not be any hats included. So in my first pass, at the moment, what I plan on doing is grabbing them from the asset store through a third party. Now, obviously, if I am to do that, I cannot redistribute them to you guys. So unfortunately, I'll show you how I did it. And then maybe if you're watching this in the future, then you'll have some hats you can actually expose right away, which would have been the best option. But really, I'm not an artist. So that being said, I did look at a couple of things, and I found this asset that I really liked. There's a bunch of low poly hats which could fit our game. For example, I see this one here. I really like this one. And it's $5. So I'll be buying it directly from the asset store, and I'll be importing that in my project. And I do invite you to do the same if you wish to use these hats. The link will be in the resource of this lecture, so you can find it there as a link. And yeah, so I'll go ahead and I'll add that to my cart. All right, so once we have the low poly hats and I have them here inside of this folder, I have materials, I have the meshes, I have the prefab, and also textures. Once we have that, I'd like to create myself a scene in which I have my penguin just standing up here on his own. I have the camera angled at him in such a way that I can see his face well, and I can also see the hat when there's going to be a hat. Um, and what I want to create is some sort of small green screen studio, you could say. So I'll go ahead and I'll create myself a new plane. That plane will be angled 90 degrees, and it's going to have a material, which I've made here prior. It's a material that is using the URP, so the Universal Rendering Pipeline, unlit, and just has a green color on it. And I just want to put that behind my player like so. Once I have that, I want to start creating those hats. So I want to actually create those hats. And what I mean by that is lay down the objects on top of the head and also make sure they are in the right format for a game. Because if we're just to say, okay, well, let's just go ahead and spawn that on top of our player, well, it's going to look a little bit too big at the moment. So let's go here on the head and it's going to look like that. Now, obviously, that is not the behavior we'd like to have. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create an empty game object every time I want to add a new ad. I'll create a new empty game object on top of the head top end. I'll create one that is called antler hat in this case, because that's the name of the hat. And then I'll put the prefab, the one that we receive, I'll put that beneath the antler hat, like so. And then I can go ahead and just reset the position of the other one. This one has to be on 0, 0 all the time and has a scale of 1, 1, 1. But the one here that we've made, the empty game object, this is the one we're going to edit, and this is the one we're going to save. So now by having these two objects, as you can see, we have one that is the one we'll be saving is the top level one. So the antler hat, the one we've created with nothing in it. Has a position of 0, 0, 0, rotation 0, 0, 0, and the scale of 1. So that's exactly what we'd like to have. We don't want to change that. If we were to change that, it might mess up everything. For example, if we change a position, that might mess up everything. We don't want to do that. So instead, when we do modification, we'll do it directly on the object beneath. So here, I can come down and start scaling it in such a way that is big enough for the player. So maybe something like that. And then move it down. And here is our first hat. Now, I realize that I did a little bit of work prior to this, but if you don't have the proper color on this, just make sure you set the material to something shader graph main, because that's the prefab we've made, the shader we've made. And then you can assign it the right texture, which should not be very far. If it's the first hat you're looking for, then it should be the first texture. But again, by that time, hopefully you already have all of that in your folders. Okay, so that will be the first set we've made. We can now take it, create a new folder under artwork that I'll just call hat. Or maybe we can just put it under prefab. Yeah, it makes a little bit more sense. So let's put it under prefab, take this and put it directly in here. Okay, I'll just do one more and then we'll move on to take pictures and I'll do the rest offline. The next one we could tackle is the second one, so the big horn helmet in this case. I will go ahead, right click, create a new object empty that I'll call exactly the name of the hat. Make sure it has a position of 0, 0, 0. Same thing with rotation and a scale of 1. Then I'll go ahead and I'll drag my prefab in here and we'll have to do scaling modification for sure on this one as well. So let's scale it down. Maybe I want to turn off the other one just for this moment, but just keep it around because we'll need to take pictures. That's a very small hat for a very small head, but it seems to fit. Oh, it seems to fit well. Okay, that's our second hat. Let's go ahead. Oh, wait, I did the modification on the wrong object, so that's definitely not something you'd like to do. So let me go and reset all I've done and do it on this object. That's where you want to do the modification. There we go. We'll grab this one and we'll drag and drop it inside of the prefab folder. And there we go. So we have a total of 2 hats being on top of this. Now, the next thing we'll need is a 3D, not 3D, a 2D software that allows you to edit images. That can be Photoshop, that can be GIMP, that can be really anything. Like I've said, chances are you already have those thumbnail, hopefully in your artwork folder. But if you're watching this when it came out, then you won't have them right away. It's an update that I do plan on making for this course. But once you have that, you can just pop the hat that you like, take a picture. Our goal here will be to take a square picture, so a square thumbnail, that includes the hat and doesn't have to include the face. So something like that will do the job. I'll put that in my clipboard for the moment, open up Photoshop, and I want to have something that is 256 by 256. Not something that's going to be too huge, but it also has to have a certain resolution, so it does look good. So I'm going to move that around, and since we have a green screen, I can just go ahead and delete everything behind with the wand tool. Make sure it is also a PNG file. Once I have that, I can save it. Now with this, I can save it under artwork and maybe a new folder that I can call thumbnail. And I won't save the PSD file, I'll just save a PNG and I can call that antler hat. Good. I'll do it one more time for the other hat and then I will go ahead and integrate what we have. It might be worth creating a script to always have the same kind of balls with the actual player, but I don't think it's going to be that important for us. Also, for example, this hat is much smaller than the other one, so maybe I want to make the face of the player a little bit bigger, like so. You can see the difference here. Whatever fit your style better. And then I can save that under the big horn helmet. Save this, and we're going to move on to integrating finally. Integration will be done in the other scene, of course, so we'll go ahead, save what we have, head over to game scene, and under the shop. Actually, we don't have to do anything under the shop. It's all done within the resource folder right here. None hat is fine. The test hat is no longer fine. It's now the antler hat. And then we have the big horn helmet. And I have a feeling that because now they are in different order, chances are the none hat is not going to be at the top, and that might be a problem. So let's see. Yeah, so here's what we can do. We can take the none hat and just put the underscore in front so it goes at the top. And this way, we can create some sort of ordering this way. So none is now back at the top. And do realize that the underscore was not put here because that's not the name, the item name. And if you want to do a certain order, you feel free to go ahead and just say something like that, which is probably what you'd like to do because the prices are going to be different and maybe you want to have the more expensive at the bottom. So really up to you, but you can go ahead and create something like that. If you do plan on having more than 10, then of course, go ahead and add 2 digits in front of it, like so. Okay, so none hat is good, no price. The antler hat, you can call it antler hat. It's fun. I don't have to name them. This one could be going for, I don't know, 10. The thumbnail is the following. So where is my images? Here they are. I cannot drag and drop them thus far because I have to change them to Sprite 2D and UI, which is fine. I'll do that here. Then we'll head back on it, drag and drop this new thumbnail and find the prefab that we wanted to have here. There we go. Same thing for the other one. Let's go with a price of 10 as well. I have a feeling that this text might be a little bit too huge, but we'll find it out in a second. And there we go. We actually put that here. Press on play, see what kind of behavior we will get from this. Well, first we have this hat looking good. And there we go. So the shop actually looks good. The text here is definitely not fine. We can go ahead and fix the text. Well, I really like this one. This one is my favorite thus far. Yep, and we're gonna have to create a thumbnail, and we'll do that immediately for the none. So that's totally fine. We can head over to the other scene, just take a quick picture of no helmet at all, and that will do the job. So here, let me just find my hats, which are right here. Turn this one off. Take a quick picture. Put that in Photoshop, something like that, and remove the green. And now we have our thumbnail for none. Okay, and that's how we've added content to our hat shop. As I've mentioned, hopefully by the time you're watching this, you already have some stuff in the folder, but chances are you might not. So either stick around for a while, create your own hats, or you can go ahead and buy the one that I've bought on the asset store, which are good looking. So if you feel like doing that, you can find the link in the description down below. And by description, I mean the resource of this course. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll address a couple of issues like this one. I want the text to be always in caps, and I might want to make sure that this one overlaps a little bit down here. And that's pretty much it. So, guys, thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one, in which we might be tackling the gameplay prefab to actually change the gameplay of the game and make this a little bit more enticing than having to stay in a single line and just jump once in a while. So, I'll see you then. Cheers. As we are getting closer to the finished product, it's time to start thinking a little bit more about the gameplay. Usually it's something you might want to start with, but we've been making this game in in one big rush. So we have been using the same two gameplay prefab from the get-go, and then as you can see right here in my folder, I have a lot more that I've made. And I'm going to show them to you, but first I'll actually create one more, just to give you the hint that we have to create many of those, and of course, create them in such a way that your game is going to be fun and enticing. So now to create a new chunk of gameplay, the way I like to do it and how our project is currently set up is by starting with an empty game object, resetting its position to the origin of the world, changing its name, and then adding this is going to be chunk number 9, adding the chunk component. Now I still don't know how big this one is going to be, but let's give it a try. With my empty game object, I'll drag and drop it inside of the gameplay, and then I'll double click on it so I can enter the prefab editor. I know that my chunk has to be angled in such a way that it's going forward on the z-axis, so in that direction. So I'll put that back at the center, and then I'll start dropping some of the element on it. So we could be doing a block. Drop that here, reset its position, and put it, say, roughly around here. Now we don't have to be perfect with the distance in Z, but what would be good is that you try to at least align them properly on the lanes. So we know that the lanes are at 0, -3, and also 3. So I can create a ramp just before that, create a gap in between the two. So here's a small setup I could be doing. So I could be bringing that all the way over to 20 meters. Now do note that these are equal to 10 meters. So when we're going to be setting the chunk length, let's say that right now it's 20 meter. We might want to give it a small room here of 23. But something like that could do the job. And then I'll just move this on this axis here. So maybe on the right lane, if you look at it this way, and move it over this way. I'll put the ramp there. And what I'd like to get as a result of this one is block all the axes and then force the player to be on this one. So what I'll do is I'll copy this, move it over to the middle lane, copy it again to the other lane, and I'll just put some more in the middle. Why not? So something of the sort. Feel free to improvise. And I'm just going to block the axis for most of this part here. So you can't just jump on it because that's something possible. And I'll just block it with a log, for example. Yep, so something like this. I'll make sure it doesn't touch this lane as well. And I'll just anchor it this way, and then you can give it like a small bit of modification as well. Now you can scale this up, you can move this in such a way that it's not going to interfere with your gameplay. And it's very important that it doesn't, because if I was able to go here and not die, then I might get stuck there, and that's not cool. That's not a cool feeling if your player just gets stuck. So instead, I'm making sure I'm just blocking all the axes. And you know what? These at the bottom here could also be logged. It would make a lot more sense. So I'm going to go down here, make sure I scale this one up. I'll just place them in such a way that it looks somewhat visually appealing. So here we go. We have chunk number 9 over here, which is a lot more messy than the chunk we've made in the past, but we know that we cover all the gameplay axes. If he goes somewhere close to here, he is going to die of one of these dead zone at least. And then if he misses the jump, he's also going to just run into this and then die. He has an option to keep on going. I hope so. I hope this is not touching the lane, but we can test this out. And just like that, we've made a chunk. Now let's measure it. It is 10 meter here, 20 meter there. So we could be assigning 20 meter exactly, or we could be just maybe cutting it to say something like 18 could do the job. With that in mind, I'll go back on this node. I'll input, say, 18 meter, go under my world generation, add one more slot for it, not 89, just 9, and I'll just drag it in here. And now you'll see that when we play our game, oh, by the way, make sure you remove it from the screen. When we play our game now, we have a lot more variety than we used to. And that's because I have a total of 9 different gameplay prefab now. And the more I add, the better it's going to be. So I have this one, I have here where I'm forced to either jump or go on the left side. I have a lot more different behavior I can play with here. Oh, and I just missed my jump. And do note that you're able to do some angles if you wish. That's totally fine. Just make sure that it's not going to get your player stuck anywhere. Here's our new prefab. It worked well. Okay, so that's really all we have to do for this. Of course, make as many prefab as you can. So go ahead and create some of those gameplay prefab and try to make them fun. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Hey, welcome back. Last time we created a lot more gameplay prefab, and we have a lot of variety now that comes to play. And something we'd like to do that we probably pretty much realized it a long time ago, but we should be doing now is to give our player some breathing room when he starts a game, because the time it takes just to change a camera, you don't really have a lot of time to react, and it's something we might want to do. And it's going to be very, very simple thing to do actually. So if we head over to the world generation, we just have to change the first chunk spawn position. We just have to add on top of this number. Now I'll give myself maybe 10 meter more. So that's going to give us roughly 2 more seconds to react. So I'll take my world generation. I'll say, hey, we're going to start at 15. And for my scene chunk, those are going to start at 20. Let's hit play. And just like that, we have a lot more room at the beginning, a lot of room to think and actually make our first move. That's really all I wanted to say for this episode, actually. It's a very small change, but it was a much needed change that we could have done a lot earlier. But we've done it now because we're pretty much wrapping things up. So come again for the next episode in which we're going to review controls. I believe that we might want to permit the player to actually switch lane in the middle of a jump. So I'll see you there. Hey, welcome back. As I was testing this game, as I was testing out the product, now that we have something that is a little bit more close to final and we have a lot more gameplay prefab, I've realized that it might be good for a player to be able to change lane in the middle of the air. So right here, as I was jumping, I might be able to change lane, and I think that's something very good. So I'm actually going to implement that. It's a fairly easy implementation. All we have to do is when we are in the air and also when we're falling, so I believe we have the jumping state, which is right here, and also the falling state, we have to permit the call to change lane. And we have to do it in 2 scripts, but I'll open a total of 3. Walk, jump, and also falling, just so I can steal the code from the walking state. Or I believe we called it running state. So I'll start under the running state. Go down here, and the line of code we wanted to add in the transition, because that's what we call every frame, was the following: the swipe left, swipe right on change lane -1, and also change lane 1. So I'll be copying this code over in the transition. right about here. I'll do the same thing for the falling state. Please don't save because it's going to take a while to compile apparently. And there we go. Now by adding these pieces of code, we should be able to look for those swipes as we are jumping or falling, and therefore change lane. So let's give it a try. I'm going to jump here, jump again, and then switch lane in the air. Yep, so that gives us a lot more control, and it's something that just help us do this one and avoid death right there. So that was a very small fix, but I wanted to do it to make sure we have a little bit more control, and I actually prefer those control. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this round of polishing, and I'll see you in the next one in which we're going to tackle something regarding the progression. So maybe you would like to display how far the player has made it in the game regarding to hat collection. So I'll see you there. Cheers. Hey, welcome back to another round of polishing. In this one, we're going to be displaying additional information regarding how many hats we have gathered thus far. So as we enter the shop, I'd like to display some kind of meter roughly around here, or maybe at the top there, leave some space for text. And that is going to say how many hats you have collected based on how many there is to sell. So we'll do a ratio and we'll cut some sort of image in there. That being said, I'll do it with default UI that I have from Unity, but by the time that you see this, then chances are that there is proper UI for this. So I'll go ahead and get started. We will be doing this under the shop page. So under the game manager, game state shop, I'll open this one up. I'll add a new section over here at the top, and this will be the reference for the images. So let's call it the completion circle, and that will get started with a public, let's do a public image completion circle, and that's the one we'll be manipulating. So I'm actually going to start by laying down the UI this time because I need to visualize it first. We are going to open up the shop UI and place this object. I'll add this item on the same level as these. So let's go ahead, right click. We'll be adding an image. So UI image, top right side anchor. Actually, I'd like to anchor it directly under the hat name. So if that's possible, I'll just copy this rect transform, paste it here. And what do we have here? Yep, we have the exact same thing as the hat. So call this one completion circle. I'll put a height and width that is the same, so maybe 500 by 500. And I just want to make sure that it's anchored properly in the middle of the hat name. So maybe position of -100. And just like that, now I'm going to go ahead and use a knob. So that's what I mentioned here. I'm going to be using Unity's UI, but by the time that you see this, the package will include some sort of ring for this type of effect, because we're using it when we die as well. And I'm seeing here that it might be too big, so I'll make sure it's not that big, maybe position X like so. And this will be the background object. Now on top of that, we're going to have another completion circle, the same exact thing. I'll call one of them background and I'll put it as a children of the first one. Or actually, it's the other way around, sorry. So background will contain the completion circle. So maybe we want to call it something else. So completion circle will be the top level one, and here that will be the ratio or actual ratio. Okay, now the goal of this is that the children will be put on top. So as you can see here, the children is on top of the image behind it. And we'd like to input a image that has a different color in here. So for example, we could use this color. And what we'll do at runtime is that we'll put the image on filled and say, okay, if you collected only 50% of the hats, then your fill amount is going to be 0.5, which will give you something like that. That's really all we have to do. Now, something that might be cool as well to do is to put some transparency on the image behind. So maybe something like that. And there we go. And I might as well want to add some text next to it. So very, very small text that will act as just a, well, just a text representation of this. So I'll anchor this, for example, here, just above the subject, put it in the middle, make it a little bit more wide, and say it's going to be something like, hey, you got 20 out of 30. Now we can change the color of this and also change the font and get a result that makes a little bit more sense. All right, so now we have to reference these two objects and also input some code. It's going to be fairly simple. So we have an image component and also we have a text mesh pro UI. Let's do text mesh pro UGUI. That will be the completion text. With these in mind, we are going to be setting them on construct, I believe. Actually, we have to reset them every time there is a something happening. So, for example, when we buy a fish, we also not when we buy a fish, when we buy a hat, we also have to reset this. So I'll create in my own function here called um, reset UI or reset text. Let's do reset UI, or actually, it's do reset completion circle. And here we'll have to assign values. Well, for example, here that's going to be the fill amount is going to be equal to 1, and the completion text will be equal to, for example, 0 out of 20. Okay. Oops. So it's .text. Okay. Now it's actually time to get these value. And our issue here is that we don't actually know how many hats we have. The reason that we don't know is that we actually put a arbitrary amount here under the save state. So if you guys remember, we have the save state here and we have a private const int for hat count, but that's not always accurate for the amount of hat we have. In this case, it is accurate. I do have 31. There is 30 different hats and then one more for the no hat. So in this case, I am accurate, but that might not be the case if you put a arbitrary amount here. You might want to put that right amount. That's totally fine. Then you can just, you have the right amount of hats. But the truth is, if you want to be 100% sure, you can always look into the resource folder, which is annoying because we have to load everything here. So what I do recommend that you do is actually input the right amount, and you can say, hey, int hat count is equal to this. You can do that, and I do recommend that you do that, and that's totally fine. I'll do that personally, but I also show the other way to do so. You can do a resource.load, just like we do for the shop. And I think we do it in here, actually. Hey, you know what? Yeah, it makes a lot more sense to do that here, actually. So we'll keep this value here. Okay, that's never mind. That's the best way. Hat count, because we're already in the shop here. And when we populate the shop, we can do hats.length. Hats is actually an array of hats that has been loaded from resource.load. So we have access to hat dot. Okay, I just went on a complete rant for the following piece of code. I'm extremely sorry for that. Hats.length. Okay, so that's the amount of hats we have. Now, how many did we unlock thus far is another question. And to have a look at that, we can do the following. Save manager instance save, and we can do unlock hat flag and find how many we have set to 1. So for this, we can iterate, or we could go ahead and cheat a little bit. So we can iterate through this. We can do a for loop on all of these and then just do I plus 1 every time there is a index. For example, index I here is going to be equal to 1. Then we can do I plus plus, not I plus plus, but like another number plus plus. Or we could head and hook ourselves right here and just keep a private value, which is something a little bit more efficient that I'll do here. Unlocked hat count. The reason it's more efficient, it's because we're already iterating through this array. So when it is not unlocked, this happens, else this happens. But also, unlock hat count is going to go up by 1. Okay, so that will work fine. And now I have access to the other number, which is how many we have right now. This is how many there is total. This is how many we have right now. But do know that one of them is actually a no hat. So I'd like to decrease these two just by one. So what we'll do here is that our add count is actually going to be equal to the length minus one, because we don't want to have 31, we want to have 30 in this case. So we don't want to count the no hat as a hat. So even though we start the game and we have one of the hats unlocked, technically that would be the no hat, I'd still like to see the number 0 here. And that's what I'll do. So hats.length minus one, and then while I'll show the unlocked hat count, I'll also do a minus one on it. Okay, how do we do that? It's fairly simple. Let's do, that's the hat count, that's the currently unlocked count, unlocked hat count minus one. Now, when we want to have a ratio for that, we first cast as a float the following. How many do we have right now? So currently unlocked count divided by float hat count. And just like so, we'll get the proper ratio in between the two. And for down here, we are just going to format that in a very specific way. So we're going to say currently unlock hat count plus, and then I'll just put a dash in between the hat count. We're going to put this function directly inside of the construct. So it's being called when we construct this, but also we also have to put it somewhere else. By the way, make sure you put it after you do the populate shop. That's very important because our unlocked hat count is going to be populated in here. When we do buy something, so on hat click, if we do manage to buy something, which is roughly around here, we're going to say unlock hat count plus plus, and then reset the completion circle. Let's give this a try. Oh, and also make sure you assign these values here. So under the game manager, for example, I'll go and under my game state shop, completion circle, put the ratio in there and also put the text. And just like so, as I press on play, well, first, I forgot to disable this. So I'll go back, press on play again. We're going to call the construct, and we have 7 out of 29 hat, which means that I've missed one when I created those. But I believe the math is fine for the rest. I just have to look. So, oh, a good way to check instead of counting like I just did is just to go inside of here and select all of them. And it does say I have 30 model behavior object, but that's actually including the non-hat. So I have missed one. My bad, but there's one hat in here that I have to input still. But the count is actually fine. Now let's see how many we really have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 here. I shouldn't have any more. Yeah, so I don't have any more. Let's go buy something cheap. Is there still something cheap here? No, I need 20 fish. Okay, let me go play a bit. Okay, so I got more fishes. It's time to go back and buy something, see if the dynamic UI works. So with 23 fishes, I have 7 out of 29. Let's go buy something. I have 8 out of 29. And my fish has been updated. So that does work. And it might be a good idea to change this positioning here. Maybe at one point, one of the hats will be too big. Definitely is going to look a lot better when the new UI is integrated. But I'm quite happy with the result thus far. So with that said, I believe this wraps up the first round of polishing. And yeah, we now have a product that doesn't look too bad, that is playable, and has a good game flow. So that being said, I'll see you in the next one, in which I believe we're going to start wrapping up and maybe publishing to the